Let me preface this video by saying I was born in '91. My primary genre is shooters, but I've always had an exception for Pokemon. I've gotten every Pokemon game on launch, including most of the spin-offs like Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness, and my personal favorite, Pokemon Conquest. I'm still holding on to hope that we'll eventually get a sequel to Pokemon Conquest, even though I know that's basically not going to happen. Pokemon Sun and Moon are great games, and I would recommend them to anyone that likes Pokemon or anyone that's not even played Pokemon before. Every review I see says that it's a 9 out of 10 at the very least. A few reviews have given it a 10 out of 10. And as much as I like the game, this confuses me. Because the game is not perfect, and it has a lot of things in it that drive me insane. Just to make sure everyone's on the same page here, I am not attacking Pokemon Sun and Moon. I like the games, and I think they are very good. But I wanted to make a video talking about the negative aspects of the game because no one seems to be talking about them. And again, there's a lot of things in here that drive me insane, to the point of where I don't think Sun and Moon are as good as the previous Pokemon games. I do like how they tried to make the games less tedious in general, by doing things like getting rid of HMs and giving you an experience share right at the beginning of the game. But some of the design of the game actually makes the game more tedious to play, and I certainly don't want to play through the campaign again. Let me explain. You spend the entire first island in this game going through a tutorial. There's dialogue after cutscene, and if it was just the first island, that'd be fine. And I assumed that. I figured I was just going through this long tutorial. But then I got to the second island, and it didn't stop. It feels like I'm constantly going through routes just to trigger the next cutscene or next dialogue sequence. There are essays of dialogue, and a lot of it is just sort of pointless information that you don't need to know and isn't important for any other reason other than trying to build characters. And Pokemon Sun and Moon admittingly does do a good job at this. It's the only Pokemon game where I've actually cared about some of the characters in the game, with the possible exception of N. I mean, really, I could tell you moments that happened in previous Pokemon games, but not the entire game. I could tell you I remember the main sequence where Groudon makes it to be really sunny with that ominous music playing, and I enjoyed that. I can tell you I remember going to the Whirl Islands to fight Lugia, and I enjoyed that. I can tell you I remember Pokemon Platinum randomly pulling an Earthbound and throwing you into the Distortion Zone, and I really enjoyed that. But I don't remember anything else that happened in Pokemon Diamond, Ruby, or Silver. And I don't really remember any of the characters aside from the main one you're playing as and the professors. And again, Sun and Moon does do a good job of building characters. 5 years from now, I'm going to remember the characters of Hau and Lily, but I feel that the game has put too much emphasis on story, and it detracts from the rest of the game. To make something clear, story is not bad. I say story negatively, but that's a little misleading. What I mean by this is that at any point throughout the game, you will have a map on your bottom screen. There will always be a nav point on this map, and usually the nav point's only one short route ahead of you. Once you reach this nav point, surprise, it triggers a dialogue sequence or a cutscene. Every time. To compound this issue, Sun and Moon no longer has gyms. It has trials. Gyms are very straightforward and don't need to be explained to the player. There's a strong trainer, and you need to beat strong trainer to get said gym badge. But with trials, each one is different, and the player has to be explained the end goal of the trial every single time. And since each island has 3 or 4 trials, every one of them needs to be explained, making more dialogue. You can see where I started to get a little impatient by how much the game talked to me. The game just seems to hold your hand a lot and feels far more linear than previous Pokemon games. Now it's not more linear, that's the funny thing. Previous Pokemon games did what Half-Life did. Half-Life is a very linear game, but you're allowed to go at your own pace and you honestly sort of don't notice how linear it is. And by the end of the game, it feels like you've traveled an extremely long distance, and that's incredibly satisfying. Pokemon Sun and Moon doesn't do this. And it also has a false sense of scale. Sun and Moon doesn't feel big. Every Pokemon game before it felt like you were either exploring a country or an entire continent. Think of the distance you had to travel just to get from Newbark Town to Cianwood Town in Silver, Gold, and Crystal. That felt pretty far, and that was only halfway through the gyms. The distance I traveled between those two towns feels longer than the distance I traveled in the entire game of Sun and Moon. Furthermore, routes themselves feel really small. For example, Lush Forest feels very small compared to Viridian Forest. On top of this, it doesn't feel like something you need to overcome to get to your next objective. You had to get through Viridian Forest to get to Pewter City, and once you were finally out of Viridian Forest, it felt very satisfying, because it felt much bigger than it actually was. And the same thing can be said for Ilex Forks to get to Goldenrod City in Silver. Lush Forest was just this small side area where you had to do one of the trials, and that trial itself had 4 sections. At the end of each section, someone talked at you. In this sense, in an odd ironic way, they made the game more tedious when they were trying to make it less tedious. I'm getting into slight spoiler territory here, so if you don't hear spoilers, you might want to bail out of this video. Alright, are they gone? Can I continue? Alright, so the Elite Four disappoints me. There are numerous reasons why the Elite Four disappointed me in this game. The first one is that it is literally being built as you are completing your island trials, and that your championship battle is the first ever that happens. The Elite Four themselves are just the island kahunas that you've already fought with one newcomer. That's not very exciting. You've already beaten them. This isn't a huge obstacle to overcome, this is just a rematch. The rooms you battle them in aren't anything special either. In X and Y, the rooms you battled the Elite Four in were absolutely amazing. You had water raining down from the sky, giant dragon statues, the whole design was just great, but all of that's basically gone with this Elite Four. And then you get to the championship battle, which is just the Professor. Yes, the Professor. Like I said, the Elite Four is a little underwhelming. What I do like is that once you become the champion, the world seems to actually acknowledge this. People acknowledge you as the champion, as the strongest trainer in this entire region. People know who you are, like you did something amazing. And although it doesn't really feel like you've done something amazing, it's nice to have that sort of recognition. In previous Pokemon games, once you became the champion, no one seemed to notice. That'd be like no one knowing who LeBron James is, even though he just won an NBA title and has been arguably the best player in the entire league for years. Another very large complaint I have about Pokemon Sun and Moon is just how poorly it performs. Now, I don't have a new 3DS, I have one of the older 3DS XLs, and this game runs like ass. Battles can have your frame rate drop to literally 10 frames a second, where it looks like it's running like a slideshow, and it would totally interfere with the gameplay if it wasn't turn-based. Although I have had a few times where even just selecting things on the bottom screen was unresponsive due to how much my 3DS was lagging. And when you're battling, things take forever for something to happen. You press attack, and the game just sort of sits there for 5 to 10 seconds before doing that attack. To me, it honestly feels like Nintendo was just trying to push the new 3DS, because the game does run significantly better on the new 3DS, although part of that is just me still being salty about SNES games not being playable on the older 3DS. Fuck you, Nintendo. The last complaint I have is more of a pet peeve that you can find in pretty much all other Pokemon games, but even more so in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Getting specific Pokemon and evolving specific Pokemon is just a complete pain. Let's take Salandit for example. Salandit only evolves when female. This normally wouldn't be an issue, except for you have an 87.5% chance to find a male Salandit, so finding a female one is a complete pain. Some of the other Pokemon have an absurdly low rate to actually show up, like Jangmo only having a 5% chance, and the place that you capture this Pokemon is towards the end of the game. Now, I don't feel like I can really complain about that too much. This is how Pokemon has always worked. The pseudo-legendary shows up towards the end of the game and is somewhat difficult to get. But what I can complain about is how difficult it is to evolve Charjabug. Nothing is special about Charjabug. It's a bug electric type, but for some reason they made it so that it will only evolve when you level it up in one place, and that one place is on the last island towards the end of the game. Why? As I said, Pokemon Sun and Moon are great games, but I don't think I'd ever want to play through the campaign again. That's something that a lot of people don't think about. Dialogue-heavy games are generally less replayable. I can go back and play through any of the previous Pokemon games, and I'll have enthusiasm to do so, because I'm thinking of the routes I need to go through and the Pokemon I want to capture to complete my team. But when I think about replaying through Pokemon Sun and Moon, I'm just thinking of all the dialogue I'm going to have to press B to skip through. If you can ignore how much the dialogue interrupts the gameplay, it can be great the first time through. But after that, you know what happens, and you're not going to want to have to read it every single time. In the end of the day, it's still a game I would recommend to anyone, but I guess I just feel a little disappointed, and I'm not sure where they're going to go for the next Pokemon game. Are they going to bring back trials? Are they going to bring back the gyms? Or are they going to do something entirely new? Whatever the case, I just hope they bring back that sense of scale and give the player that false sense of freedom to where he can do whatever he wants at his own pace. But thanks for listening to me rant. I hear people talk about this game incredibly positively as if it is the second coming of Jesus and that it can do no wrong, so I just wanted to get this out somehow. I'll see you guys next video.